The rain fell harder that night than I'd seen all year. And that's the night she decided to walk into my life. Alice. Just saying her name conjures up memories of her. Those blue eyes that smoldered like cigarette embers. The way she held a champagne flute. Her voice. Her voice. Sounded like velvet being drug across a satin sheet. Well, I should probably start a bit earlier than that. As I was saying, the rain was falling hard that night. It was a rough week. A rough month, really. I couldn't land a case any more than a drunk could say the alphabet backwards. It was around 10:42. I remember because I checked my pocket watch and decided it was time for another drink. I thought maybe that would clear my head. No sooner than when I set the tumbler glass back down on the table, I heard footsteps scrambling up the stairs.
Detective Adams!
Listen, buddy! You bust into my office at this hour. You're lucky you're not saying hello to the end of my 38.
I'm sorry, you...
Now I'll start with the questions. Who the hell are you?
She's gone! Gone, I tell you!
Who? Who's gone?
My sister. She's gone, and you're my last chance at saving her.
All right, mister. You're gonna have to start giving me some details. Sit down.
Well, I don't really remember. But I can tell you where we started out. This place called Hatter's, down on 40th near the Strip. Nothing was out of the ordinary until we had a couple of drinks, and after I tipped the bartender more than he probably made all week, he told us about this old-style speakeasy where the drinks they offered were different. Cocktails that made you shrink down to the size of an ant, grow bigger than the ceiling, get lost in other worlds for hours when only minutes passed by. Real out there stuff. Well, the next thing I know, I wake up the next day, still in my clothes, and couldn't remember how I got home or where Alice had gone. Or even if she had come home. I looked everywhere. I went back to the bar, but the bartender acted like he didn't know me. And you can imagine the looks people would give me when I start talking about this mystery bar or even more mysterious potions. Exactly the look you're giving me now.
So, let me get this straight, man. There's a guy down the street selling cuckoo potions. But it sounds like you may need a psychiatrist instead of a PI.
Look, detective, I know this sounds crazy, but you need this case. We both know it. Please, you gotta believe me. She's the only family I've got. I can't lose her this way.
The man was in a sad state. His hair was completely disheveled and had this mad look in his eye. Like he hadn't even slept in weeks. Desperation clung to him like the stench of cigarette smoke after leaving a bar with no ventilation. I knew he was telling the truth. I had an eye for that sort of thing. What do I call you?
Matthew. My friends call me Matt.
Well, Matt, I am going to help you. But you gotta know, I don't come cheap.
The rent due sign on the door says otherwise. But I'm not cheap myself. Believe me, if you can find Alice, you won't have to work another case for weeks.
I like the sound of that. The rate I was going, it may be that long before another case came across my desk. Matt didn't give me much to go off, but I knew where to start. Hatter's. Well then, to Hatter's it is. Say, what's your sister look like anyway?
Blonde hair, blue eyes with a faraway look in them. Trust me, you'll know it's her if you see her.
I stepped outside and had the divine pleasure of trying to hail a taxi. At midnight. On a Sunday.
Hey, taxi!
Finally I did.
Yeah, all right, where to?
Hatter's. I slipped him a 20.
Oh, well, yes, sir. Right away.
Step on it. Wait! I yelled over to Matt, who was leaning up against a wall trying to light a cigarette. Meet me back in my office in 2 hours. This shouldn't take long. He nodded solemnly before going back to nervously striking his lighter. Okay, now you can step on it. The taxi took off like a rocket, a steel yellow beacon cutting through the smog and rain. For a city that never sleeps, it sure seemed drowsy tonight. I looked out the dingy glass window, feeling a bit like a canned sardine. Buildings passed by like faces in a dream. After a couple minutes, the lights of the Strip washed over the cab. I squinted my eyes at the bar tucked away in a corner and saw an old wooden sign that read in swirly carnival paint, Hatter's Ball. A cheesy neon sign of a giant top hat blinked on and off. I got out of the cab and hurried inside from the rain. The bartender was one of those Weasley types. Thin and angular with a perfectly trimmed mustache. He had high cheekbones, deep-set eyes, and a firm jaw. The kind of guy that's charming, that you want to like, but there's something under the surface that rubs you the wrong way. Makes you uneasy.
I haven't seen you around here before. What brings you in?
I kind of got sick of my side of town. Decided to get out a bit. Expand my horizons.
In this weather?
Well, I am, adventurous. I shot the bartender a slight grin. He returned it. We kept our eyes fixed on each other for a brief second longer than we should have, like animals gauging the other for a hint of weakness. After a few minutes, I asked him the million-dollar question. Speaking of adventure, suppose I was looking for a different kind of drink.
Not sure I know what you're talking about.
I slipped a 20 out of my pocket and slid it across the bar.
Well, I've heard of a place, but my memory is kind of fuzzy.
I sighed and slid another 20 across the table. So far, this case was costing me more than it was paying me.
Ah, yeah. I remember now. Look, I can't name any names, but to get there, follow the White Rabbit. And you can start by looking out back. The door all the way in the back of the bar, just before the kitchen.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. Listen, buddy. I think for $40 you can do a little...
That's all I can tell you, mister. Unless you'd like another round.
He smiled at me like a reptile. At this rate, if I was going to spend any more dough here, I couldn't afford a taxi back to my office. The cryptic tip would have to do. You know, I'm okay. Thanks a whole lot. I finished my drink and moved to the back of the bar. I spied the door near the kitchen and walked through it. I looked around outside, but didn't see anything but a dumpster and a dimly lit back alley. I thought about stepping back inside and having a few words with the bartender, when suddenly a car pulled up and nearly squashed my big toe. Just then, I noticed the name on the side of the car. Rabbit Taxi. The cab was all white, the only one I've ever seen in this city. I immediately changed my tune and hopped in. The cabbie plastered behind the wheel surely wasn't bred from this city. He wore an English-style top hat with an upturned mustache. Besides that, I couldn't tell much else. He wore a large overcoat that hid much of his profile. The only clear feature were his steel blue eyes, eyeing at me from the rear-view mirror. Yeah. So,
Hold on now. Tally-ho!
Before I could finish my sentence, the cab ripped through the alley, onto the road, and down another side street. I tried to reach for a handle to grip onto, but I found none. Before I knew it, I was tumbling around in the back seat like a dog in a kennel crate on an airplane. Actually, it seemed like I was in a fight with gravity itself in the back seat of the cab. By the time I finally got my bearings and clambered onto the seat again, the car came to an abrupt halt. Oh,
Here we are,
God.
sir.
Where the hell? I was in no hurry to be in the White Rabbit a second longer. I got out and looked around. Either Prince Charles was pulling my leg, or this was the shadiest liquor joint this side of the Atlantic. The cab stood in front of a crooked-looking building. A faded sign on the outside read, "The Hole in the Wall." The only sign of life was a gaslight lantern, swaying out front like a feather in the wind. It tussled back and forth in the wind pitifully. I turned back to look at the cab, but there was nothing there. Just the dark alley and my own tired reflection in the street puddles. This night just kept getting weirder and weirder. At that moment, part of me thought I was going to wake up at my desk. That I fell asleep after that drink and this was all some warped dream. Part of me wanted to find the girl and get the reward money. Part of me wanted to sprint back down that alley, back towards the familiar part of town. I stood there for a moment, only feeling a little bit sorry for myself. After a couple of seconds, I swallowed the dread back down in my gut and moved towards the bar. I took a deep breath and swung open the rickety wood door. I took a look around, and my dread was replaced by bewilderment. The bar was so dimly lit I had to squint my eyes to see anything. It reeked of pine and mildew, and while it wasn't a particularly lively scene, its occupants took no notice of the stranger walking in. A serious-looking lady in the back sat playing hearts with her geriatric crew. A portly older man in a fuzzy jacket with woolly caterpillar eyebrows sat at the bar, smoking a hookah pipe and spouting riddles to anyone who cared to stop and listen. A quirky tune was playing over the ancient radio by the front of the bar. Now, I know New York is strange, but this place was on a whole new level. I was just about to ask one of these lowlives where I could see a man about getting a drink when I saw her. She was in the back, alone. Tall, blonde, blue eyes with a gaze some might call that of far away. She seemed to register me the second I laid eyes on her. She looked at me. The dame was beautiful, but, something was wrong. She was babbling to a cat.
Oh, don't be silly. I can't stay here forever. I need to get back home to my brother. Okay. Well, maybe one more.
From her hip, she raised a champagne flute. Inside, well, I assumed it was whatever made her talk to that cat. I didn't hesitate. Alice! Put it down, Alice!
What? Who are you? How do you know my name?
Alice, listen to me, kiddo. You're messed up pretty bad. These drinks are doing something to your mind, and your brother's worried sick about you.
Boy, are they? Just a few minutes ago, I was 10 feet tall, and now I've shrunk back to the size of an ant. Say, have you met my friend here? Oh, go on. Tell him what you were just telling me.
All right, kid. Come on. We'll get you out of here.
I can't leave yet. I have to go to the trial.
Trial? What never mind that. We're leaving. The broad kept tugging at my arm as I dragged her to the door, her heels digging into the wood floor as we went. For Christ's sakes, lady, I've got to get you to Matt.
Matt? Is he here? He was just here. Where is he? I miss him.
Oh, Alice, you're leaving? But the fun was just starting.
Now, I don't know what he meant by that, but I sure as hell wasn't sticking around to find out. Alice's pace had picked up at hearing her brother's name. We busted out the front door with a purpose. I could already see one of the White Rabbit's cabs in the distance, its white frame reflecting the neon signs that line the streets. Hey, taxi! Don't worry, Alice. We're almost out of here. It finally stopped in front of us. The wipers were working overtime, furiously hopping back and forth, like a politician promising a clear view. I shoved Alice in before me, her bright red dress now darkened by the downpour. 250 52nd Street. Step on it. The driver floored it without another word. Street lamps blazed by like shooting stars. Alice was leaning up against me, breathing slowly, her face lighting up every few moments to reveal her blonde hair spilling onto her face. The cab began to slow. I looked back out the window to see we were approaching my office. Matt should be inside waiting. As soon as the cab stopped, we were out. I only briefly paused to toss the cabbie a 20. We rushed inside.
Alice! Oh my God! Alice, you're so pale! What happened to you?
Just get her to the hospital! I've got some questions that need answering. With a crack of a door and some hurried footsteps, they were gone. I was back where I started, alone in my office with nothing but the sound of rain. But I wasn't going to be there long. There were too many unanswered questions. What was in that potion? What was that place? Who was the bartender? And what did he mean by the fun was just starting? Huh. But that, my friends, is a different story altogether. One for a different night. Good night, everybody.